So hello everyone and welcome to our final live review session. So today we're going to be wrapping up on the bottom two, the most southerly subregions of Borgogne, and then hopefully we've got a fair big chunk of time to spend on exam prep. So we'll look at the essay question that was set as homework, we'll look at some map questions, we'll look at some multiple choice, and just feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Okay, so as I said, we are going to go through the last two of the subregions, so Côte Chalonnaise and the Mâconnais. And we are going to start with our usual slide about the location of each of these. So Côte Chalonnaise, obviously sandwiched between the southern end of Côte de Beaune and the northern end of the Mâconnais. You can see here it's quite a thin, skinny strip, 35 kilometers. We are still on the escarpment, the end of the escarpment from Côte de Beaune, but here it is a little bit different. It's a little bit more fractured, so it's not quite as consistent as we saw in Côte de Beaune. Largely east facing, but that fracturing means that we have vineyards facing every direction of the compass. So there's a variety of exposures, although, as I said, most of them are east facing, but that difference does show up when we look at the grapes and we look at what's been done in the various villages. There are 5 village level AOCs. You can see them on the map there. Starting at the north, we have Bouzeron, Ruy, Mercury, Givry, and Montagnier down in the south there. So those are your 5 village appellations. However, there are an awful lot of regional AOCs bottled from here. So there's a lot of Crémant de Bourgogne, which a lot of the vineyards are around Ruy, for example, but they wouldn't show up in the Ruy production numbers because they are part of that regional AOC. Interesting down here, we've got, it's about 50-50 whites and reds. So we're seeing a bit of a difference there compared to the Côte d'Or. What's the other impact of having this more fractured landscape here? What does it mean for the weather? It is cooler, exactly, Ewan. Because you've got these westerly winds can make their way more prevalently or more dominantly here than they do in the Côte de Beaune. So there's less shelter from those winds. It is still continental climate, but temperatures are cooler than in the Côte d'Or. Overall, yes, as we move further south to Mâconnais, we're going to see it getting warmer as well as we near the Mediterranean. But I think it's interesting that the Côte Chalonnaise is further south than the Côte de Beaune, but it is in fact a little bit cooler because of the landscape. And Mâconnais, so Mâconnais is just a little bit down the road from Côte Chalonnaise, a bit further south, and it stretches from Côte Chalonnaise all the way down to Beaujolais. So there's a major split there as we go into a different region. This one is the largest of the subregions, and you get a sense of that in the map. It's a bit longer than the Côte Chalonnaise, so it's 50 kilometers, but it's also much wider, and you can see that we've got vineyards going over a much bigger distance rather. So largest of the subregions. Again, we have 5 village level AOCs. We'll go through those, but you can see them on the map there. And we have, again, a lot of regional appellation bottlings being made here. Some of them do fall under the Mâconnais group, the Mâcon AOC group, but that still counts, remember, as a regional appellation, although it is more restricted in borders. Okay, let's have a quick look at some of these areas in more detail. So Côte Chalonnaise overall is often referred to as the lost region. Why is that? Did somebody lose the map? Any ideas? You're typing? No, sorry, Ewan, that was your answer from last time. No Grand Crus, it's cheaper. Exactly. I mean, it's overshadowed by its neighbors. There's this lack of media attention. You know, a lot of the journalists, or a lot of those famous critics focus on the famous wines of the Côte d'Or. So it doesn't get a lot of love, Chalonnaise. Plus, also, half of its production is bottled as Bourgogne Rouge or Bourgogne Blanc, which means it doesn't have a big profile on the market, right? It's kind of lost its branding a little bit because of the importance of the regional bottlings. But I think what's important here is to recognize that the quality is really great here. It's never been better. Why do you think the quality has been improving down here in Côte Chalonnaise? Yep, we've got a less price for land, so it's more. It's a good investment opportunity, and we're getting more money to invest in better equipment. Anything else that you can think of? Exactly. So we are getting those really new winemakers coming in, partly, as Ewan said, because it's less expensive to buy land down here. But it's this new wave of winemakers, not just coming from the Côte d'Or, but as Von HT said, it's these younger vignerons who are coming in. They have worked all over the world. They've traveled, done vintages elsewhere. And so they're bringing a lot of experience and innovation and passion to these projects. So really helping to raise the profile and the quality of the wine. I think the other huge big opportunity for Côte Chalonnaise is on price point. I think we all are aware of how expensive some of those famous Côte d'Or wines can be. And so Côte Chalonnaise isn't up there yet. And so it can be a really good opportunity to get some value Bourgogne. So well done on that. Let's have a look at one of our village level appellations in the Côte Chalonnaise, Bouzeron. And it is known as a stronghold for aligoté. Why is that? I know I'm asking you lots of detailed questions here, so you got it tight. It is cooler. What makes it cooler, Ewan? Yep, Paul, you're absolutely right. Aligoté was traditionally grown here. They didn't switch after phylloxera, so there are some very old vines, which are, capable of great wines. Yeah, Ewan, it's that north-facing exposure that is really important here. Again, going back to that statement about this being much more fractured escarpment down here, we do get vineyards at different exposures. Those north-facing cooler sites are where we find aligoté because it will still ripen where Pinot Noir and Chardonnay probably wouldn't. So you find, the Chardonnay Pinot Noir getting the warmer, lower sites so that they do ripen. So when we are going into the exam for the multiple choice questions, I've said this many times, so it's not new, but remember to focus on what makes this appellation exceptional, because those are really easy fodder for multiple choice questions. So what are a couple of things that we should know about Bouzeron? One, it is a stronghold for aligoté. Aubert de Vian, absolutely, is based here, producing some great wines. Though we don't tend to ask a lot of questions about producers on the exam, but that's absolutely valid. What are the wine styles here? What gets labeled as Bouzeron AOC? Anyone know? Okay, so Bouzeron AOC is biggest claim frame. There we go, only whites. And it's not just whites only, because there are other village levels which are white only. But as Richard just said there, it's only aligoté. So this is the only village level appellation in Bourgogne that is 100% aligoté. That's a major point of difference. You can see how that would be really easy to put into a multiple choice. So don't, when you're doing your triage, read those entries and just highlight all of the things that are unique and different about the appellation. The one other thing I would point out here is just what's going on in this picture on the left-hand side. We've got a picture of Aligotti. Oh, Richard said it's a cute little village. He cycled there in May this year. Absolutely correct. It's beautiful. And again, you could maybe weave that into some of the statements about it being under-recognized. Yes, there we go. Paul and Ewan, etc. They're talking about the two different um, types of aligotti. So we have aligotti vert on the left there, and then aligotti doré. Which one is viewed as being superior? Doré, exactly. Why is that? What does it give to the wines that the aligotti vert does not? Right, it's got that more perfumed, more elegant, a little bit brighter. So a lot of people are going there. Greater intensity, acidity, more aromatics, lesser yields. Yes, those are all true. It's just, it is a little bit more expressive than Aligotti Vert. Again, points of difference between the two things. Okay, so let's look at our second village here, Mercury. So in the 1980s, a new drainage system was put in Mercury. Why was that? This is a little bit more obscure, but again, it's one of the exceptional things about Mercury. We have this drainage system that went in the 1980s, but why? Any ideas? After land was moved by tractors, too much mud compacted soil. Yes, there was a flooding. Absolutely correct. So in 1956, Inau extended the planting rights, and to get the land ready for planting, they used bulldozers to soften some of the contours. But bulldozers can be quite heavy. And so they compacted the soils. And then when we had some storms in 1981 and 1983, there was flooding, right? And so that triggered the new drainage system being put in. So it's interesting to see the long shadows of some events, historical events, and what it means today. On to Givry. So Givry was once highly regarded. It's got this really long history of royal patronage, and also the French popes enjoyed the wines of Givry. And so before phylloxera, it was really well known. Yeah, Henry IV, Ewan, you're right. He used to meet his mistress here, and the red wines were his favorite. So again, lots of love going to Gevry. And then what happened? When did it fall out of favor? Maybe Henry broke up with his mistress. I don't know. It wasn't the Gamay here. They were just really slow to replant. And, I think if you look at any of the French wine regions, or any region in the world really, when there is a vacuum created for whatever reason, phylloxera obviously created this massive vacuum where there weren't the supplies. Their demand was there, but there wasn't the supply. And anybody who didn't replant quite quickly or didn't respond to the challenge quite quickly lost an opportunity. And that's what happened here in Givry. They didn't replant quickly, so all these other areas got ahead of them and established themselves as great producers. I know it's not Bourgogne, but if you think of what happened in Languedoc, the phylloxera and replanting and quickly moving after phylloxera sort of quadrupled the production or the exports, the sales of Languedoc wines because they moved so quickly. And here we're on the other side of that. But there is again, just like we're talking generally, there is a renaissance here. You've got some new dynamic producers. The reds are really great just now. So arguably, some people would say the best in Chalonnaise. You've got great plant material here. So you're just getting a lot of really great wines. It's kind of exciting to see them reclaim their stage. And Montagnier. So today, this is a white-only appellation, but this one is exclusively Chardonnay. But it wasn't always like that. So when and why did we see that switch? And we don't, when we're looking at history questions, we don't expect you to know a particular date, but if you can name a decade for this, that would be the level. The reverse fault was more suitable to Chardonnay. That's true. They had some great terroirs here that's very suitable to Chardonnay, but there was another factor that really drove the change. It's money. It's money. So Pinot Noir and Gamay were extensively planted up to the 1950s, and then the growers here noticed that Chardonnay had a much higher price point, and they had some great terroirs that were very suited to Chardonnay. And so they started to switch over. Now, that didn't happen overnight. They didn't sort of like haul out all their vines and replant. But as they were replanting over the next 20 years, next couple of decades, we saw this switch going towards Chardonnay. So money talks, money talks. Okay, so down in Virey Classé, this one is the newest AOC in the Mâconnais. Why? Were they not known before? Combine the two villages into an appellation? Yes, correct. But why weren't they combined in the beginning? Yep, there we go. Virey turned down the offer to have an AOC. They were worried about the tax implications. So when the AOCs were being set up, that offer was made to Virey. They declined it because they were worried about paying higher taxes. And for decades, right until 1999, they were sort of DGCs of the Macon group. So it would be Macon Classé and Macon Virey. But then they brought them together into their own AOC, Virey Classé. But that didn't happen until 1999. And I think that's interesting. If you read your study guide or listen to Robin, you're going to see a lot of producers making a decision for good reasons at the time, but then they didn't play out so well, right? And some of those decisions have long shadows. This is an example of that, which was only corrected in inverted commas in 1999. And just a reminder that Virey and Classé are two villages. The AOC covers both, and there's another two villages that are also included in the scope of this appellation control. All right, so let's talk about Pouilly-Fuissé. This is obviously the big appellation down here in the Macon. We have a change that happened more recently in 2020, and they recognized 22 crus or premier crus. What were some of the criteria applied for determining which crus would be elevated and recognized as premier crus? Fame, yes, they did have to have that history and recognition as for the particular vineyard that was being promoted. You had to have those Jurassic clay limestone soils, correct? And same elevations above sea level. Yes, true. They had to be the maximum of 400 miles above sea level was what was applied to the sites here. Exactly, not using chemicals. They weren't allowed. I think that's super interesting. No chemical herbicides whatsoever. So that commitment to sustainability being actually written into the regulations here. So I think you've got them all. Lower yields as well. We talked about that. And there was a quality assessment of the wines themselves. So they really did try to be quite strict in applying those, the criteria to identify the 22 Premier Crus. And what about Saint Veran? So Saint Veran, way down here in the south, it isn't always recognized as well. Again, it's another one of those appellations that tend to fly under the radar a little bit. But what's going for it? It is much cheaper than Puy Fusé, absolutely. It just doesn't have the same recognition. But why does that particularly matter here? It's really the location. So, I mean, if you work with your maps, you'll see that Puy Fusé is right in the middle of the villages of Saint Veran, the different areas that are included. So very similar terroir. It is easier to work, but it's a similar sort of soil stuff. And so they do have a marketing edge there, possibly. It's cheaper than Puy Fusé, but we're in the same area. We're just right next door. We have a lot of the same kind of things going on here. So that is an opportunity for them. And Puy Vinzel and Puy Locher, we've got a series of true or false statements here, just looking for some of the points of difference. So first of all, is this true or false? Both are village level AOCs. And Ewan is saying true. Anybody else want to jump in? Von HT is also true. Anybody else? That one's quite easy. It is true. Yes, they are both village level appellations. What about vineyards of Puy Vinzel face southeast? Paul says true. Ewan says true. That one's actually false. So the vineyards tend to face east, overlooking the Saône plain. So just a little bit of a nuance. Absolutely, you're going to find some vineyards that are southeast, but generally they face east. What about co-ops play a minor role here? False, Ewan, false says Paul, false says Von HT, and you are correct. This one is false. So the co-ops do play a major role. So about 80% of the production of both go through the local Vinzel co-op. So they're a major player here. And our last statement, vineyards in Puy Locher are less steep than Puy Vinzel. Is that true or false? One HT says false. Tom says false. That one is actually true. So Puy Locher is immediately to the north of Vinzel, and it's just a little bit less steep. But the vineyards of Puy Locher also tend to face east, so they have that in common. The other thing I do want to highlight here is just something that won't come up in the multiple choice, but you can absolutely weave it into any of your short answer questions. And that's about the new Premier Crus that have been approved in Locher and Vinzel. So approved at the end of last year, I think it was November or December last year, they approved 4 new Premier Crus. There are 3 in Puy Vinzel and 1 in Puy Locher. So again, you will not see that coming up in the multiple choice questions. It is in your corrections and updates document, but you could use it in a short essay question. It was also interesting when they did the change, they updated the cahier de charge and some of the regulations too. So a little bit similar to what we saw in Pouilly-Fussé. So lower yields, higher ripeness levels. Then we have no chemical weeding and biocontrol agents. So those are prohibited. Manual harvesting is mandated, and there is an aging requirement to say that they can only be released after July the 15th in the year following harvest. So they put in some stricter production rules there with an eye to trying to make this, one, sustainable, and two, have these definitely be a step up in quality from the village level wines. And just, these premier crus down here in the Mâconnais are shifting. We had Pouilly-Fussé leading the way, Pouilly-Venzelle and Locher coming in at the end of last year. There are maybe more to come. Saint-Véran has also applied for recognition of some premier crus. So we're beginning to see things shift down here in the Mâconnais, which is actually quite interesting, quite cool to see that happening. Okay, a question about Gamay in the Mâconnais. So Gamay grown in the Mâconnais may be labeled as A, Mâcon AOC, B, Mâcon Village, C, Mâcon plus DGC, D, Bourgogne, E, Coteau Bourguignon, F, Crémant de Bourgogne, G, Bourgogne Passe Grain. Ewan saying A, that definitely can be labeled as Mâcon AOC. We've got Paul saying A, D, Bourgogne, Coteau Bourguignon, and Bourgogne Passe Grain. That's all true. And Yvonne HT is saying A and D, so that's Mâcon and Bourgogne. We have Tiago saying Mâcon plus DGC, Coteau Bourguignon, Passe Grain. I'm being really, really horrible with this question. It's all of them except B. So Mâcon Village, there is no red Mâcon Village. All the rest, you could grow Gamay down here and it would appear in one of those bottlings. So I'm sorry, that was a bit nasty. And you would never get one with 6, 7 different choices in the multiple choice. But again, what makes Mâcon Village different is that it's white only. Right, so there's no red. So again, focus on the exceptions and the rest will fall into place. Okay, so what is a lèvreté? This is a slightly unusual wine style. Late harvest, says Ewan, late harvest, says Tom. That's right. Where is it traditional? Where Viré Classé? Yeah, it is. More specifically, it was traditional in Classé. The 8 to 18 grams per liter residual sugar, that is correct. Is Colosseum a typo of Classé? I love that. Sorry. In Viré Colosseum, in Viré Classé, there is also a demi-sec version, which is 4 to 8 grams per liter residual sugar. So here are all those things. But again, you could get a multiple choice which asks about lèvreté. The key things to know is that it is late harvest style, can have botrytis, but that's not mandated. It is traditional in Classé. It is officially part of the Viré Classé appellation rules. The residual sugars. There is a minimum alcohol. Again, do not worry about minimum alcohol levels. We will not test on that. There are lower yields and there's some aging. So quite strict production rules here, but what is key is the wine style and where it is made. Okay, so I'm going to, I know we're taking about 30 minutes to go through that review quite quickly. I apologize for that, but I did want to spend more time on the exam prep, just so that we can have a bigger discussion and make sure that you're all ready. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, there's 14 people, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask questions as I go through. Sorry, give me 1 second here because I have to do them one at a time. There isn't an unmute or I just want to, this is your chance to ask all of those exam questions and I will do my utmost to understand, to answer. Okay, so you should all have the ability to talk now. So let's go through it. We're going to start at the beginning. And I know that you've all seen this before, but the exam. So your exam will be done online with a proctor. You will have 2 hours to do the whole exam, and there are 3 different sections. And you can jump from one section to another and back again. So it's easy to navigate. It's not just you must do your map questions and then you move on to multiple choice and then you do your essays. You can flip between those. So ahead of time, think about where you want to spend your time. There are 10 map identification questions. They're each worth 1 point. So that would give you a maximum of 10 points for the maps. There are 50 multiple choice questions, and they are all going to be, you know, the question in an A, B, C, D, so 4 options, like we've been practicing as we go through. And then there are the 4 essay questions, and they're each worth 10 points. So those essay questions, to be honest, are where people tend to struggle most, but they are worth an awful lot of points there. So in terms of a time allocation, the map questions are going to take you 5, maybe 10 minutes. They're relatively quick. We'll have a look at an example in a second. The multiple choice questions, if you think back to FWS, if you did French Wine Scholar, you know that you had 100 questions in an hour. So I would allow 30 minutes maximum to do your multiple choice questions. You will find some of them are easy, some of them are medium, and some of them are a bit harder. And so all the questions in the exam bank are weighted, and you get a random select, well, not a random selection. We'll pick so many that are easy, so many that are medium, and a few harder ones to really try and separate out the exceptional students. And then that leaves about 55 minutes for the essays. So, plan for about just under about 12 minutes, I guess, to do your essay questions. Passing score is 75%. There is no minimum passing score in any one of those sections. So you could mess up all of the map questions and you would still, you could still get 90 points and pass. Honors is 85 to 90. Highest honors is 91 and above. So aim for that 91. Okay, any questions about this format? We're now going to look at each of those 3 sections and look at some examples. But that's all clear?
Is there a specific deadline to do the exam?
There is. You have 1 year from the welcome webinar for this. So that would be, where are we?
February.
Yeah, February. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Now, if you enrolled late and you didn't enroll until March, you would have a year from your enrollment date. But, if you enrolled last November, December, your expiry is still tied to the welcome webinar.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay, Paul, you're saying, I found some of the sample exam questions throughout these reviews to be more granular than I expected. Paul, if you're talking about the ones where where you've got the image above and then there's a question and then we walk through them like the drainage system today, that is correct. Those are more granular than you would get on the exam. What I'm doing, some of those are geared towards multiple choice questions and the exceptions that could be phrased as a multiple choice, and some of them are beginning to test your approach to the short answer questions. So those questions are not typical. Okay, we'll look at some multiple choice questions right now. Paul, we'll see those. Tiago, a quick correction on time. Did I do my maths wrong? If we take 10 minutes for the maps and 40 minutes to the multiple choice, 18 minutes for the essays. Thank you. You know what it is? The exam used to be 90 minutes and I didn't adjust accordingly. So thank you. You are correct, Tiago. You have 20 minutes per question, approximately. Okay, so let's have a look at some of those multiple choice questions. Oh, sorry, we'll look at the maps first, then come to the multiple choice. So Paul, feel free to ask another question when we get there. So for your maps, on the Moodle, you have all of the blank maps that could be used in the exam. So if something isn't there, you're not going to get it on the exam. If something, still one of the Grand Crus has its name showing on the label, we're not going to ask you about the location of that Grand Cru. So those blank maps which say testable are the only subset of maps that you will get on the exam. We will be asking you about the villages. So, you have a blank map of the Côte de Beaune, and we ask you where Montelay is, and you would have to find the number. We will ask you about the Grand Crus, with those names blanked out and with a number. So those are fair game. The only time we might ask you about specific climat are for the Chablis Grand Crus. So, we've got those 7 up there, and we have that map that shows them all. So that is fair game. Top tier Premier Crus, those are the ones that are in your appendix in the back of your study guide, and those are fair game, but only those top tier. We're not going to ask you about all of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Premier Crus that are in Bourgogne. So Richard, I don't think there is a blank map for Mâconnais in the testable folder. That is correct. So only those maps that are in that testable folder will come up in the exam. If they're not there, they won't come up.
Which folder is it? Sorry.
Sorry?
Which folder is it? Which folder are you talking about?
I don't have my thing open, but I believe it's under resources tile, and then there is a downloadable maps folder.
Ah, it's not in the book. Sorry.
No, correct. No, it's
okay,
on
sorry.
Moodle.
I was
Yeah.
looking. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so it's on the website. Okay.
Yeah. So that's really important to work with those, because those are exactly what you're going to get. So as an example, if you go into the exam, you could get this map coming up, and you can see that the various numbers on there, and you would be asked to locate something. So here, Batard Montrachet, and you would be expected to put in, is it 15, 17, 18, 23, 24, 25, 26, blah, 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 blah. So you would just be entering that one number. And again, those things that you're going to be asked to locate will be either the Grand Crus, the top tier Premier Crus, the Climat and Chablis Grand Cru, or villages. So we could show you Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, for example. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to make sure that you are working with those maps. And there's not that, I can't remember how many there are off the top of my head, but if you look, they're all there. So if you got this in the question in your exam, what would you answer?
25.
Well done. Exactly. Batard Montrachet is 25. And so you just type in 25. Is that easy?
Okay.
If I said Le Montrachet, what would you say?
24.
Well done. Le
Some
Croix
people
Batard.
more than others.
I know. It's just a good, this is exactly how they will come up. So they're usually quite quick if you know these maps.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying it, 5-10 minutes at maximum. If you get stuck, then you're just going to have to guess a map, a number. But if you also know your maps, you know the Grand Crus and the colors and the Premier Crus. We're not asking the Premier Crus unless it is one of the top tier. So there are things that you can help to do some triage there. So does that help with the maps? Does that make sense to everybody?
Very much.
So Sharon,
Very
so
clear.
for example, number 38, I think
Oh,
it's
yes.
38, I've got my glasses on. So that I don't think is a top tier Premier Cru.
Correct.
So we would never be that would never be the right answer in
Correct.
multiple choice for anything. Yeah, okay.
Correct. So there are some that are there to trip you up.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Right, but if you know your Grand Crus and you know your top tiers, you can exclude that. So yes, that's a good sort of nuance there. Paul says, can we come back to the multiple choice question and maps after finishing everything else? Absolutely. you can navigate backwards and forwards, just like if you had a paper exam in front of you and you're flipping over the pages. You know, you could start with the essay questions if you wanted to, and then go back to the maps, or then do the multiple choice questions. So that, think about your strategy before you go in to the exam, and just make sure that you use your time wisely. You know, we've gone through the 3 sections. Tiago has corrected me on my numbers there. I'm so sorry about that. But that means if you're on the map questions and you're 20 minutes in, you're cutting yourself short on the other sections. So do some of that timing for yourself and just self-discipline, because again, the essay questions, you do want your major chunk of time for them to think about how you're going to respond and then to type them out. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a couple of the multiple choice questions. So here, our first question is, which Côte de Beaune AOC has similar soil characteristics with those of the Côte de Nuit?
It's Pommard.
Correct. It is C, Pommard. There we go. Okay, Tiago is asking a question. I was looking at the Beaune Romani map, and Echezeaux is divided into a lot of Ludis. Could we be asked about Ludis? Because on the testable map, there are multiple divisions on Echezeaux. You will not be asked about individual Ludis. You will only be asked to identify the Grand Crus, the Grand Cru Climat in Chablis Grand Cru, the villages, and those top tier premier crus. You will not be asked about the Ludis. So what you will find, Tiago, is if there is something like Echezeaux and we look at the Ludis that are coming up in that won't be a question, because I wouldn't be able to put a single number that covers all of those Ludis that are in Echezeaux. And as we all know here, like the relationship between the Ludis and the Climat are messy. Sometimes it's 1-to-1, in which case it would be a fair multiple choice, a map question. Sometimes it's many to one, sometimes it's 1-to-many, right? It's messy. And so I'm not going to do that to you. They will be clean. But great question. Okay, so next multiple choice sample here is, what Mâconnais village was once a part of Beaujolais? Was it Virey-Clessay? Was it Saint-Véran? Bois-Foussay? Bois-Vinzel? Saint-Véran. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Correct. So remember, that is right down in the south of the Mâconnais, and it used to be part of Beaujolais. And interesting again to note that the village has got that D on the end, where the appellation does not. And that's just local usage over time. I think the original saint had the D, and then we think over sort of time, locals just didn't pronounce it. So it was written down without the D, but the village still has it, or something like that. It's just how language evolves, but interesting to note that difference. Okay, so let's have a look at another couple. Which of the following statements is incorrect? Fissan AOC incorporates the village of Brochon. Fissan and Brochon may produce Côte de Nuit village. C, Fissan has no Premier Cru monopoles. Or D, Fissan has no Grand Crus.
E.
Was that a D you said?
Sorry, I thought it said D Grand Crus.
Okay, no, we're looking for one that is incorrect. So C, Tiago and FonHT are saying Fissan has no Premier Cru monopoles. It's incorrect, because
It's
they
B.
has no, it's C.
3. It has 3
It's 3.
monopoles.
Yes, correct. It's got 3. So there's a total of 6 Premier Crus, and 3 of them are monopoles. This would definitely be in the hard category. I know that is exactly why I included it, Paul. It's a tricky wording. So just, you know, under the exam pressure, I know it's really easy to not read the question properly, but if you get which of these is false, which of these is incorrect, which of these is true, which is correct, be very, very careful and just take your time to read it, because it is so easy to trip up. and then you get stuck. I mean, I do it all the time. I know I do it. I speed read, and then I'm going through the option. I go, well, hang on a minute. This is true, and this is true, and this is true. So how, and then you're like, oh no, they're asking which is false. So just take your time and make sure you read fully and underline words if you have to. Okay, so another one which I would put in the tricky bracket, which of the following Bourgogne Grand Crus is not a monopole? La Romanie, La Tâche, Richebourg, La Grand Cru.
It's Richebourg.
Yes, it is.
Richebourg.
It is. So you're all right there. Fantastic. Well done. So those are the example multiple choice questions. Anything that you want me to go through there, or are you still finding these quite granular? Because these are retired multiple choice questions. I said these last two I would put in the hard category. You're not going to get 50 hard questions, but you will get some.
So the questions we've been through are supposed to be what? Easy, difficult? I mean, which one are they supposed to be?
Okay, so this one, I think, number one here, the Côte de Beaune soil question, I would put in the moderate category.
Okay.
Because Pommard, we just know that's, that's one of its unique things. And the Mâconnais part of Beaujolais, I actually think this one's quite easy, maybe easy to moderate.
Agree. Yeah.
And then the other two here, I think these are hard.
Okay, thanks. Just for evaluation. Okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
exactly. And I say they're all weighted in the exam bank, and you'll get so many easy, so many medium, and a few of the harder ones. Just trying to separate, the great from the good. Yes, they are easy to misread. As I said, just please take your time. Incorrect there, not a monopole in that second one. Those are your keywords, but very easy to skim over those. Okay, I'm going to move on to the exam, the short answer questions. So you will get 4. As I said, these are the ones that people often get tripped up on, and it's not because they don't know their stuff. It's just they're not answering the question as it's been asked. So again, read the question slowly, right? Just you've got, as we've now got our revised time, you've got about 20 minutes. I would take a good 3 to 5 minutes to plan your response before you start to enter. Think about the different things that you could say, and then think about what makes sense in terms of a sequence in my essay, because that makes it easier for the marker to find you points. We're not trying to be mean. We want to give you points. We want you to pass, but you've got to give it to us. So just, take time to plan it. Make sure that you don't forget the obvious things. Often you're going to find a compare and contrast question. Think about the grapes. We often forget about, oh, this is white only, or this is red, white, and rosé. We often forget those more obvious things, but they're worth mentioning. You could get marks for that. So again, don't overlook the simple or the obvious. Make sure you pick up all of those easy points. You're going to answer it fully. So you are, if you get asked to describe the climate, the topography, and the soils, answer about all of those 3 things. Do not talk about history. You've got no points there for history. Do not talk about commercial position. There's no points there for commercial position. It's just climate, topography, and soils. The other thing is, I've seen this before. Sometimes you're asked to describe 3 winemaking techniques, blah, 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 that are used on Pinot Noir in Bourgogne or something. Do not write about 7. You won't get points for the other 4. We've asked you for 3. So I'm reading the chat box as I'm talking here. We've asked you about 3, so just answer for 3. Occasionally, if you are asked to give an opinion, make sure you substantiate that. So an example of an opinion, what are some of the opportunities for this appellation? That's kind of an opinion, but you can say, I think there are great opportunities because there's been a new wave of dynamic winemakers coming into the region who have traveled, who have oenology degrees, blah, 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 blah. So your opinion is they've got an opportunity, and then you're substantiating it with some facts. So again, make sure that you join the dots for us. Okay, Paul, you're saying telegraphing the answer is not the same as bullets. Is telegraphing okay? Give me an example of what you mean there.
Yeah.
Is it headings?
Headings. The simple statement of a fact will get you some points, but if you have been asked to assess that or evaluate it or put it in context, then it's not enough. So the question is a little bit more nuanced than that. It really is dependent on the question. And most of the short answer questions are not just about facts. We want to test your understanding. We want to see that you have some critical thinking, that you can evaluate things, you can weigh different factors. So a simple list of facts is not going to get you over the finish line, not going to give you high marks, because we really, at the master level, it is about proving your understanding and that you've got that critical thinking down pat. And it does say down there, a list of bullet points is not an essay. That is true. But if you're down in the weeds and you have mismanaged your time, you can stick down fact A, fact B, fact C, bullet, 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 and you will get some marks. You won't get full marks though, because often we're looking for that next level thinking. Okay, are there any general questions? We'll look at the question that was said as homework next, and we'll do another practice one. I know this session always takes longer, but that's okay. Okay, so let's have a look at this essay question. So this one is a retired question. I can tell you why it was retired, but let's have a look at it. So what obstacles prevented Montelay, Ossie-du-Ress, and Saint-Romain from enjoying the same fame as their neighbors Meursault and Volnay? So what are we being asked to write about? What are the key words there?
Obstacles.
Obstacles, right? What are the barriers? Exactly. And then we have got a scope statement. There are 3 AOC or 3 villages that we are being asked to comment on: Montelay, Ossie-du-Ress, and Saint-Romain. So you have to address all 3 of those. And then it's comparing their position to Meursault and Volnay. So you need to be making that link as well. Meursault did this, Montelay didn't, that kind of comparison. So you need to structure your response in that way. Because we've got those 3 areas up front, you can make an informed guess that you're not going to get 10 points if you only write about Montelay. There's going to be about 3 or 4 points for each one of those. So we would expect you to get at least 1 point for each of those villages. We don't publish the weighting key, but when you see something like that, this question as written doesn't differentiate between those 3 villages, so they're going to be treated equally in the marking key. You can assume things like that. So how did people tackle this? Does anybody want to go through how they tackled it?
Yes, of course. It would be very interesting to see.
Okay. Who is that? Sorry, who's speaking?
Hans. I'm Hans.
Hi, Hans. Do
Hi.
you have yours handy? Do you want to go through that?
I have sent it and I've never heard anything back, so I do not know if it arrived.
Where did you send it? Well, first of all, I'm sorry, I don't do individual marking of essays. There are, 300 students in Bourgogne, and I've got hundreds in Champagne, so I just can't do that one-on-one support for submitted essays. That's why we do it live, and that's, why I said to come prepared. So sorry, I didn't see an email come through from you with that, but that would be the reason why you haven't had a response. But do you want to talk us through your structure here and how you approached it?
Well, I've taken a look at the history of all three villages, and
Right.
I try to remember what is the difference. For example, I do not have it at hand.
Okay.
I've written it down, and it's somewhere back in my mind. So what I know is that Ossi de Res, the wines were in former periods. These wines were sold either as Meursault or Volnay. They didn't.
Yep.
Before the 1930s, they didn't bottle it under the name Ossi de Res.
Mm-hmm.
Next point, what I've written is that Ossi de Res is very difficult to spell, which makes it difficult to sell, because if you go to a restaurant and order a bottle of wine and you have to say Ossi de Res, people tend to order a
Yep.
Pommard, which is much easier.
Good point.
Saint-Romain is in a hidden valley,
Yep.
really far away from all the others. So this was important for me, and it was the climate was much cooler. And before climate change, they had a disadvantage to get ripe grapes and ripe
Yep.
wine. So they were not able to get the quality of grapes.
Yep.
Although they
That's
have
good.
perfect chalky soils, they were
Yep.
not able to produce really great wines from this soil.
Okay.
And Monteley, they produced for a very long time Gamay, as far as I remember. And
Yes.
this
Yeah.
was a disadvantage. So people thought Monteley wines are not good as the others because they stick too long to Gamay.
Yep.
Instead of replanting with Pinot Noir. This is
That's
some of the things that I remember that I've written.
and those are all bang on. And so I think what I'm hearing is that you approached it by taking each of the villages, so Monteley, and talk about some of the obstacles there. Ossi de Res talked about some of the obstacles there, and then Saint-Romain talked about their position. So I think that is a really solid and genuine approach to this question. So that's, I don't know, does anybody else want to share how they approached it? Okay, I'll look at it by organizing by village or AOC here. And so this is very close to what you did there, Hans. So we can, start with an introduction. For me, I like to just put something that's pretty generic as the introduction, and that is to get me going. Because I can look at the blank screen or a blank piece of paper in an exam and my brain starts to freeze. So I find just taking that first step and getting something down on paper on the screen really helps to unlock my brain. That might not apply to you, or it might, but for me, that gives me something just to get going. And so I would set the context for this in terms of Meursault and Volnay and what makes them great. And then I would do a separate paragraph for each of the three villages that are named there. I like to start with something factual. So I'd put a factual statement on the location of Monteley. I would compare that to the location of Meursault and Volnay. So, this is just to the west, or this is sort of in between the two. So you could just have a short statement there. This obstacle that you mentioned, that Hans, that was the Gamay issue. And I would just, are there any other obstacles? Is there an inherent quality issue here? And I don't think there is, right? The soils in Monteley are well suited to the reds. We've seen this switch now to Pinot Noir, which is really helping to move on from the Gamay. Ossi de Res, same kind of structure here. Again, you mentioned this in Ossi de Res about coming to market under a different village, name, so Volnay, Pommard, or Meursault. And I think the other quality issue or obstacle here for Ossi de Res is that traditionally they've been quite inconsistent. So I think things are shifting, but I think that inconsistency you can also argue has been an obstacle for them. Is there an inherent quality issue? I don't think so. Like we have the white wines of Ossi de Res are often compared to Meursault. And so they've got a lot of the similar things going for them that could make them great. And then a Saint-Romain, same thing. Again, you mentioned its location. That is absolutely critical here. You know, we're in a side valley. It doesn't have the same exposure. It's higher than the usual sweet spot. Is there an inherent quality issue? Well, it was elevated from Haute Côte de Beaune. I don't think that's a quality issue. I think that is a recognition issue. That again, because they used to be rolled into Haute Côte de Beaune, they don't have that same profile. The whites are described as Chablis-like, and the reds are delicate with bright acidity. You can talk about perhaps the opportunity here because of climate change. And, you know, you mentioned the chalky soils here. So yeah, it's got great terroir. And with climate change, that terroir might be getting better because it has traditionally been a bit cooler. And then I would just wrap it up with some kind of summary. Again, I would weave in the Meursault en Volnay. So that is one approach. The other approach that I thought about is to go through some of the key factors, right? So instead of doing Montellet, Ossi-Duresse, Saint-Romain, you could group it into the different factors there. So again, an introduction there, again, just to get me going. And then I could have talked about historical legacy and recognition and talk about, you know, what is the reputation of Meursault and Volnay. What made them successful was building that reputation. They had influential producers, they had critical acclaim, they had a narrative, a really strong narrative, whereas the others, abbreviated here, but the other three didn't have such a strong historical narrative and was often overlooked, or they have been often overlooked by critics and consumers. And particularly, we can use the Montellet example of being planted to Gamay. And then terroir nuances, we can say that, you know, this is the same region. So they, you know, largely share the same climate, same soil, but things differ when we look at the individual villages, and there are subtle variations. And so you can pick some of those up. And that's, you know, you can see there, I'm saying that they are capable of producing good wine. For Montellet, they've got soils that are really well suited. Saint-Romain had, again, got those chalky soils, which are great, but the exception or the quirk here is about being in that side valley. So you can use, and I've got some more, but you can see here that it's still got the same kind of points that we had in the first one. They're just written in a slightly different way. And we can see, you know, the other thing I talked about, scale of production, market visibility, and the branding and classification dynamics was the other one. But you could think of other factors here. You know, so when you're looking at this essay question, think about, okay, what are the broad groupings of different obstacles? Is it the terroir? Is it the history? Is it the branding? Is it market position? You know, you can think about the general buckets of things that they could tackle to try and gain some better PR, really. Did that help? Any questions on that? Anybody came up with something else that they think I've missed? No? Okay. Then I'm going to make you work. Here is another sample essay, and I just want you to take a couple of minutes and think about how you would respond to this. Again, don't worry about writing out all your points, but just think about the structure here. So it's pretty simple essay question. What factors can contribute to the structure and flavor aroma profile of Pinot Noir grown in Bourgogne? So what factors? You should have your little checklist of natural factors, which would be climate, soils, etc. And human factors, go back to WSET as a base. I think we can be a little bit more nuanced here, but you know, use that as a base and see if there's anything that you can say about those factors that it's particular to the structure. So remember, structure, we're talking about the acidity, we're talking about the tannins, we're talking about the alcohol level, and that flavor aroma profile of Bourgogne and Pinot Noir. So we are talking only about Pinot Noir, so do not write about Chardonnay, do not write about Gamay or Aligotti or any of the others. It says grown in Bourgogne, so be very careful of that, because it's not just a regional bottling, right? You should be, excuse me, you should be thinking about all the different levels in Bourgogne. So anything that happens at the regional level, at the village level, Premier Cru, Grand Cru, right? Remember, again, to stretch it over all the quality levels and all of the different sites as well. Okay, go. Just scribble some ideas down, you know, again, this is what you're going to do in the exam. You're going to take just 3-5 minutes to work out all the things you could say and then put them into a logical structure. And Paul, I see your comment in the chat box which says grouping is how I would have answered, and yes, this is telegraphed. I'm not entirely sure when you wrote that. I'm sorry, I missed it. I was talking, but I would say just to note that the examples I walked through are not essay. It's not a full response. That was just about the structure. So I wouldn't have written that in the exam, but I would have written my paragraphs to cover those points. Okay, let's, I'm aware of the time here. So anybody want to just talk about how they would respond to that?
First of all, I would talk about the location. So the 47th, how do you name it? Degree of where it's located. So it's
Okay.
on the northern end of winemaking possible. Yep. Which makes it suitable for Pinot Noir, because Pinot Noir doesn't like it if it's too hot in summer. It doesn't like if it's too freezy, if it's too cold in winter. And Pinot Noir definitely needs all 4 seasons to strive. And this is one thing. The other thing is the perfect location on this escarpment. So that the wines are not overall on flat land, that they are on this embankment, where they, in a lot of regions, especially in the Côte d'Or, they have these southeast facing vineyards, which make it possible that Pinot Noir reaches the levels of ripeness which is necessary to produce great wines. If all the vineyards were facing to the north, they wouldn't have ripe grapes. That's in my opinion. And then the various terroirs in Bourgogne, which are exceptional. These are not only 3 different types of terroirs. These are terroirs which go back to the Jurassic period, Bretonian and Bajocian age, 150 to 150 million years ago, and this faulting that that there was not only like in the Paris Basin these flat levels of soils, one above the other, but there was faulting, much faulting, which caused several different soils on which the Pinot Noir grape can thrive.
Okay, I think those are all valid points. I think what you would need to do in your response, though, is be very clear about the link to the structure and the flavor aroma profile. So you're absolutely right. This is at the northern end of where we can traditionally ripen grapes. So that means that we have less phenolic development. So there's less alcohol, there's less fruit, less saturated pigment, there's a taut acidity, right? So take that fact and then be really super clear about the link to that, to the question that's being asked. Rodrigo, you said you've separated it into two groups, so geography, climate, soil, so some of those natural factors, and then more on the human side, the producer, decision about style, vinification, harvest time, etc. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that? Maybe look at what you could put under the producer's thing. What are you thinking of? Okay, no worries. All right, so I'll just, I'll go through some notes I had. Again, this is not written out. It's just some of the points I think you could make. I've already said this, but, have your checklist and just go through and think if there's anything that you can say. Ewan, I would group it with the variety of levels of wine. Do you want to talk to that a bit more?
Yeah. I would say that Grand Crus in the main on mid slope, whereas a Chorey Le Bon is not got any Grand Crus and Premier Crus because it's on the flat, and associate that with the sunlight
right
interception and the alluvial wash from the combs.
And you would again make the link to what that means to the structure and aroma profile.
Yeah.
Always that second thing. I think that, I mean, again, there's not one way to tackle these questions. So you just need to get all your points in. The other thing some of the things that you could think about, again, I talked about the cooler climate, which many people have mentioned here, but making the link to the less sugar, less phenolic development. You can talk about the soils, limestone rich marls, and Hans, you had so much more detail in there, but just link it to what that means for the wine. I mean, a really high level rule of thumb, you've got those limestone rich marl soils, which help to maintain acidity. If you looked at the winemaking, you've got that tradition of wild yeast fermentations that you could mention, and just how that can add some more complexity to the wines. A lot of people are hands off, so less overt use of oak, which again lets the fruit shine. So that's part of that wine style. The demand and the trend to freshness, you could link that to winemaking choices, and just how it's being led that way. But I think if I was looking at that, I would tend to have a short paragraph on each of those factors and start with the fact. So this is continental climate. It is cooler. Therefore, that means 1, 2, 3. And within some of those bullets, I would start to weave in, the different nuances, the microclimates, or the difference between the quality levels. Ewan, when you're talking about the sunlight and the exposure, that's brilliant. I mean, linking that back to the Grand Crus. So there are, again, you're trying to get, on that one, you're trying to get 10 points. And there are so many points available. There's 1 or 2 around climate. There's 1 or 2 around soils. There's lots of choices. Talking about the location on the slope, the topography as well. I mean, you've got lots of things that you can build in there. But I think some of the time it's about how you organize your answer, and just making sure that you always tie it back to the question as asked. So, I mean, just giving me a list of, facts is not going to work here because you need to link it to the style of the wine. So does that help you? Any other questions about the essay questions?
Sharon, did you say for the practice question that we looked at, did you say there was a reason why that had been retired?
Yeah, I don't like it basically, but there's two reasons. We found some students actually misread the enjoying the same fame as their neighbors, and they were thinking of other neighbors, not just Meursault and Volnay. So there was some misinterpretation, which wasn't fair. So it wasn't clearly worded. I also don't think there's too much you can say about these three. I think, there's maybe one point that really stands out for all of them. So it wasn't it wasn't to the same depth as some of the other questions. Because when we're doing the questions and we do the marking key, we want to come up with 20 possible points, and that's just our brainstorming. It's not fair if one of the questions, if we're struggling to find 10 questions, it's not a good question. So we want you to, them all to be at the same level. Similarly, if I can come up with 40 points, that's not a good question. It's too broad. So we're always trying to find the right balance. And this one didn't feel as balanced as some of the others. But it was only when we saw it, saw some of the answers, we got, I don't like that. So tweaked it.
I see. Okay, thanks. That's clear. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Paul said, may we take blank paper to sketch out our responses? Yes, you can. So when you go into your exam, the proctor will ask you if you've got any blank paper, and you have to hold it up and show that there's no notes on there, that is truly blank, but you can have that by the side of you. That was a policy change we put in place about a year ago, 18 months ago or something, just to make it fair. If you were taking this in class or, in a paper exam, you would scribble on your exam paper. And I do think, you need space to think about your response and structure them. So yeah, you can take a blank paper. Anything else? Then I'll just look at scheduling your exam. So I mentioned this at the beginning. You do have a 1 year from the welcome webinar to take the exam. There are instructions on your on the Moodle in terms of when you're ready. So go to My Online Courses and Exams and read that, follow that, and create your exam link. There's no rush. You can. We're in a tricky position because I think you probably saw this. There is a new version of the manual. So the new course that starts in the fall has a different manual. So extensions will be a little bit tricky for you. But what we will do, because if you extend into the next session, you're going to be examined on the new study guide. It's not a whole lot of information or a lot of change. We have the two biggest changes. We've taken out the PTO pages. So those white pages, and that book is available as a companion study aid, but it is not interwoven into the main study guide. For a couple of reasons. I'm sure I find it kind of a little bit clunky to go from one voice to another voice, and the repetition isn't always smooth. It also means when I get questions on the PTO material, I can't do anything with it. It's not our content. So that's always been a bit tricky. So we're separating them out. Obviously, all the corrections and updates that we've talked about, whether it's the Premier Cruise in Poy-Locher or some typos or misunderstanding, they've all been incorporated into the study guide. But, for Bourgogne, the basics remain the same. It's still in the same place. It's still hugely complex. Still got the Grand Cru, still got this same top tier Premier Cruise. So there's a lot that is consistent. But if you do extend and move over to the new program, you would also go back to the beginning, so you wouldn't have all of the recordings. But what we've done is we will make all of the recordings available to you on day one. There'll be a password protected area where you can go and get all of those recordings, because I didn't want to reset the clock completely on you if you are almost ready to write. You have the old exam will be that expiry date. So the February date when we had the welcome webinar. If that's going to be a problem for you, I suggest you reach out to Andrea McEwen and just explain what the issue is. Okay, so you basically have until February next year to do this. Any technical limitations like browser type? Oh my gosh, don't ask me, Paul. I hate the technical side of things. Andrea McEwen is your person for that. I believe Safari works, but I think Chrome is better. But don't quote me on that. I'm sorry. Andrea is your go-to for all of those types of questions. And I know there have been a lot of issues with Proctor-U. We've working with them. We've made hopefully some improvements to make that exam process smoother, because it's, you're stressed going into these exams, and you don't need additional logistical problems coming up.
And Sharon, a quick question on the resit. If it's a resit if we fail, not if we don't get the top mark, or
Correct.
that is.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can only resit it if you failed. So no resitting just to
And
push
if we-
yourself up highest honours. Sorry.
Yeah, and if we fail, we do it again, we can still get the highest honours.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
sorry, the last one was about the updated book.
Mhm.
But you were saying that the updated book is, you're right, we started in February. But you said the updated book comes into effect at the end of November. So
No,
does that
end
mean
is for September, and that will be the
that-
new intake, the new class that starts in fall. So
right?
we've opened up registration now for the fall class, and those people will be getting the new study guide.
Right. But for the exam is still open for us till the end of till February, and that
Correct.
exam would be based on what we've been studying at the moment, or
100%.
does it go?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, where you will
So-
be tested on what you have.
Yeah, what we have. So we won't be tested on the new book from
No.
September on. It's what we have here. Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Thanks. Right, can just follow that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky when we have these transitions, but no, you will be tested on the material that you've been working with. So in things like, you will not have any multiple choice on a Poy Loche, right? The Premier Cruiser Poy Loche. But as said, if you're writing a short answer question about the Mâconnais and it makes sense, you can weave those in by all means. But our multiple choice questions will come from the study guide that you have and nowhere else.
Yeah, all the way up to February when
Correct.
it's the last date we can
Yeah.
take our exam. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else? No? Then I will say a bonne chance. So good luck with your studies. Obviously, I'm not disappearing as of today. You can still use community or circle to reach out if you've got any questions. I'm there to help you. I know it's a lot of material, so I appreciate how much studying you have to do, but always here to help. So please reach out anytime. Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
I've really enjoyed working with you, or seeing all your hard work, not my hard work, but your
Yes.
hard work in the chat box. So well done.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Really.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.